ready? Are we going live? Because it still says scheduled. Oh, we're live. That took a hot minute to get live. I don't know what happened. Hello, happy Sunday, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. I think what today is going to be about is all about what's happening with real estate commissions. There's been a lot of confusion out there, a lot of misinformation. I've heard the whole gambit, and we really haven't seen the full effect of what's happening with real estate commissions, and that won't start until August 17th, I believe. It's the actual date. We're going to look at an article, but really, honestly, I thought the best thing to do was to talk to somebody in the real estate business that's doing these contracts and has been doing them for years. She actually just put out a really good video about the real estate commissions. It was really well done. And I thought we should interview her because, like I said, there is a ton of misinformation when it comes to the real estate commission. So without further ado, why don't we welcome Miss Jen Sylvester? Yeah.
What's happening?
I watched your video. I'm very fortunate, by the way. We were very fortunate here. I watched her video this morning and I wondered if she'll come on my stream today. So I messaged her. I'm like, hey, I know this last minute, but will you come on the stream? She's like,
anything for
yeah,
you.
sure.
Anything for you, Kristina. Anything.
Let's do it. Happy Sunday, everyone from Hot Box, Denver. Yeah. Is it hot there in Massachusetts?
It is very hot. And to be perfectly honest, the only reason why I'm sitting here is because I didn't want to go mow my lawn in like 90-degree heat with 75% humidity. Mm-hmm. So I was supposed to mow the lawn and I'm like, you called and I'm like, the lawn's going to wait and I'm happy for it.
You have a good reason to procrastinate. You get to hang out with all of these cool people in the chat. Speaking of the cool people in the chat, let's give them a little shout out. We got Lawnmower, MH08, King in City. We got V-Man, Mountain Tactical, Jerry Reed, Eric the Blue, Love and Light, Alan Zamora. I hope I said your last name right. It's so great to see everybody in the chat today. Yay! Hello from hot Rhode Island. Jen is actually from my hometown, Plymouth, Massachusetts. She's right there.
Plymouth. You got it. Not too far.
Okay, so all right. So did I get the date right, Jen? Is it August 17th is the day?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion because originally when the settlement came out, they were talking July 15th. Mm-hmm. So then but the court hadn't approved it yet. So now it's been approved and the date is August 17th. Okay.
So there's been lots of papers flying across desks of different lawsuits of now the buyers are complaining and there's another lawsuit. Is there anything that could stop this from happening by August 17th? No, it's happening.
Unfortunately, this train has left the station and the train is barely on the tracks. Mm-hmm. And it's not put together. And I think it's going to be messy. It's going to be very messy for what they've delivered to us and said, okay, it's been approved. Here's what we want you to do. And here's what the consumer is allowed to do. It's a mess, but it's happening. It's absolutely happening. New forms are coming down. We're getting new information, new direction from our state board and whatnot, and what forms we're supposed to use and all the things. So there's no stopping it at this point.
Okay. So, you're saying it's going to be messy. The way that real estate transactions worked before was the seller would negotiate with a real estate agent on how much they were willing to pay in commissions. So whether that was 5%, 4%, whatever. And then that agent would split it between two brokers so that the selling agent would get a commission, the selling agent broker would get a commission, and then the person that listed the house, their brokerage would get a commission, and then it was split from there. Now, how is it different?
So here's the thing, and this is where it gets controversial, I guess, right? So, there's a lot of talk about, it's the end of the 6% commission, and now, sellers can negotiate the whole 9 yards. And the reality of it is, back in the day, the way things have always been is that there's one set fee, or not one set fee, but one fee to encompass everything: the buyer fee, the seller fee. And the problem is that the real estate agents were never did a good job. We never did the job of explaining the seller what they could do, of being able to pay less on a buyer agent fee. It was always clumped together. It was explained that way to the consumer. So that's one of the reasons why the DOJ got involved, is to clarify. It's more to clarify the ability of what the seller can do, more so than all of a sudden now they're allowed to do it. They've always been allowed to do it, but the real estate industry did a lousy job presenting it to the consumer, a really lousy job. So now, because the DOJ stepped in and said, okay, well, guess what? Real estate industry, you can't do it, so we're going to make you do it. And now the buyer agent fee and the seller agent fee are completely separate, 100% separate. So now when you meet with a selling agent, when you meet with a listing agent, you want to list your house for sale, the conversation is 100% what are you paying the listing agent? That's it. There's no lumping in fees of the buyer agent or any of that kind of negotiation up front. So those fees are obviously significantly less. They should be, because they're not lumping in a buyer agent fee. But it's two-part conversation, because there's the listing. Okay, what are you going to pay the listing office? Now we have a whole different, and this is where it gets messy, because it's a whole different conversation around what are you going to pay the buyer agent. And that's where a lot of people have had kickback on, no, I'm not going to pay the buyer agent anything, or I'm going to pay him little, or why do I have to talk about it, and all the different things. So,
well, I think the other confusion is that some sellers are like, because some markets have shifted, right? So some markets are not seeing the same kind of real estate market that others are, And so when you're in a market that has a downturn, or you're seeing more listings, they think, well, can I still offer something to the selling broker? And how do we do that? Is it still possible for a seller to offer a commission if they wanted to?
Well, it's not so much a commission. It's not called a commission anymore. It's called a concession. So the short answer is, yeah, absolutely. Because the reality of it is, and I've been doing this since 1996. I've been in real estate a hot minute. And so, the reality of it is that a buyer up to this point has never had to reach into their pocket to pay any kind of agent fees. Mm-hmm. So a seller who says, okay, we're going to put our house on the market, and Mr. Buyer, if you want to buy it, oh, and by the way, if you have a signed buyer agreement, which is part of the whole, after August 17th, if you're working with a real estate agent and you're buying a house, you are required to have a buyer agent agreement signed with that agent. The terms, we can talk about that separately, because the terms are very negotiable. It could be for one house that you're looking at, as property. You're not married. You don't have to be married to that agent. But it's, if that buyer wants to look at that house and the seller is saying, no, you know what? I have my agreement with the listing agent. I'm only going to pay the listing agent the 2%, 2.5%, whatever they negotiate. And that's it. Now the buyer says, oh gosh, I have to pay my agent. I can't afford to pay my agent. I have money for my down payment. I mean, more than anybody, Kristina, the state of the affordability situation in this country. Mm-hmm. These buyers, especially first-time home buyers, are coming into the picture, and they're barely enough money for down payment and closing costs, and now they got to come up with money for a buyer agent.
I just think that, the affordability problem is a thing. So, but I think that if the market shifts in enough markets, if there's a significant shift, sellers are not going to be as, holding the cards against their chest kind of way. They're going to be a little bit more open to the fact of, yes, correct, bring me a buyer and we will pay some concessions. The thing that I saw in your video, which I thought was really good, was that you're explaining the scenario of that there is a buyer's agreement that you had made with the buyer, that it was at 2%, but the seller is offering 2.5%. Mm-hmm. That 2% still goes to the buyer's agent. That leftover 5% goes to who?
The buyer. So if, to answer your question from earlier, as the market shifts and a seller wants to, open their doors to as many buyers as possible. They don't want to limit how many people can afford to come, in the front door. So they say, I'm going to offer that buyer a concession. They don't offer them a commission. They because they're dealing directly with the buyer, not the buyer's agents, like off to the side. They're dealing directly with the buyer. The seller doesn't have any connection to the buyer agent. So the seller may say, hey, listen, I'm going to give you, and this is where it gets, I think it's going to be overwhelming for the consumer, because the seller could say, I'm going to give you 1%. The seller could say, I give you 2%. The seller could say, I could give you $5,000,
Right.
$7,500, $1,000. It's whatever, whatever you want to present as to help those buyers out, to get those people in the door. But to your point, if they say, I'm going to do it the traditional way, I'm going to give 2.5% of the purchase price as a concession to the buyer, and then the buyer agent has an agreement with the buyer for 2%. Well, the money all flows through the buyer now. So that 2.5% goes to the buyer at the closing table, and then the buyer settles up with their agent
But you
separate.
can't pay a buyer. So does it go towards the purchase price of the house?
No, it does. So it'll be right at the closing. So on the closing, how when you're purchasing a house and you have your closing disclosure. Okay, your actual closing, the HUD, the document that has all the money breakdowns, right? So
Right.
anytime there's a concession, whether it be they're giving you $4,500 because the roof needs to be repaired or something of that nature, it's handled this. It's going to be handled the same way. You have the seller, and the seller's going to say, I'm going to give the buyer a credit for X amount of dollars, and then that credit is going to be used. How that's going to happen, I don't know the actual particulars of like how the money gets transferred, because there's
something, you can't give a buyer a check at the closing table.
no, it's a credit.
Yeah, it's a credit.
It's a credit.
It's however they decide to use that credit, whether it's home repairs, whether that's inspections, whatever it is at the end, it will all get paid at the closing table. The
100%.
buyer isn't technically going to walk away with a check from the sellers, even.
Correct. Because it's a concession. It's a concession. So
because like a lot of people think that too, even before all of this, like they would say, oh, well, they're giving me $10,000 in closing costs, but I only need 5,000. So I want the other 5,000 for myself. I'm like, that's not how it works.
No, but if so what'll happen is that if, and this is the gray area. This is where the lending institutions at large, and the VA included, right? Because the VA is, the VA, they're having to rework the framework of their lending policies, because up until now, buyer can't pay anything. But that was a problem when the settlement came down. So I know that they're if they haven't worked it out yet, they are. But I'm sure the lending institutions are going to be working that out as well, because the question I have is, okay, so say I'm buying a house, and the seller is going to, I want to roll my closing costs into the mortgage, which is something first-time homebuyers do all the time. Well, there's a cap on how much the lender will allow you to roll in.
Right.
And if you say, I want to do closing costs plus the concession that the seller's giving me for my buyer agent, well, that will exceed most of the caps that on the standard lending caps that exist now. So there are changes that are going to be coming with that.
Okay.
I don't know.
So they haven't ironed out all the details of all this then.
Well, and that's the thing is that the changes will go in effect the 17th.
Right, no matter what. But they're going to have to change some things along the way.
It's and as far as the logistics of actually closing, those I'm sure will be hashed out in the next 30 days for sure.
Okay. Because every state has little different laws when it comes to certain things, and but like there was when this all came out, I was eyeing TikTok and YouTube and everything else, and I was very I wasn't surprised. I shouldn't say that, but I was a little alarmed on how people were a little confused on how commissions worked. But they were like, that's it. The game's over. You don't have a job anymore. Real estate will still sell. There's no doubt about it. I think, like you said earlier, the people that are going to see the most effect from this in a negative way are going to be people that are purchasing homes that either have never bought a home or are financially strapped on buying a house. And so they're looking for, all the ways that, closing costs, because we always negotiated closing costs for first-time home buyers all the time. So not only was the seller paying the commissions for both sides at that time, they were also negotiating even more to help pay the buyers closing costs. And that would be like $3,000, $5,000, even $10,000, depending on what, and that was the kind of money that people were willing to pay. And now they're like, I'm not going to pay any more than 2%. And that seems fine now until there's a shift in the market. And then sellers are going to be a lot more open to first-time home buyers and people that do need those concessions.
Well, you know what I think is going to happen, and I think that this is, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned, I've been at this real estate game for a while. The percentage now, and I support my family on this career. This career has been very good to me, and we work hard and the whole nine yards, and I'm grateful for the people that have helped me run my business, all the clients and whatnot. However, the percentage model in this day and age, I think we're going to see some serious changes.
Well, I think there's going to be lots of brokerages that have been out that are going to be more appealing to buyers, where they do the a la carte type of thing, where they do like a menu.
That's what I think we're going to see more of. I think we're going to see more of maybe some common sense fee structures. Some common sense.
But fees are always negotiable. Like I even
is.
I always did like there was things that, like what they called ministerial acts, where I was just kind of shuffling paperwork across the desk, I always hated dual agency, but I had a brother and sister that were buying each other's houses. So, I reduced the commission drastically because, they know each other. They're literally talking on the phone with one another. That was like a different kind of thing. That was all negotiable. Every single part of it. The only time, like my broker would tell us we couldn't take less of a commission for X amount of dollars. They would say that to us as agents working for them. But everything was always negotiable.
Well, I think that's going to be the big thing that actually is good for our industry. I really do, is because you and I both know that it's always been negotiable, but the general public didn't.
I don't think it was disclosed correctly.
It was absolutely not disclosed correctly. It was not presented correctly by the real estate industry to the consumer, that they have options. And if you don't have a savvy, if the home buyer or home seller was not savvy, if they weren't in that sales business or in the business of negotiating, then they just accepted what they were told. And that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. So I think that some of these changes are going to be really good. And I think a lot of lousy agents are going to be leaving the business, which is,
well, how many times did I hear, well, that's it, you're not getting 6% from anymore? I'm like, I rarely got 6%. What are you talking about? I live in a rural area. They didn't only builders offered 6%. When the market was really terrible back in 08 and 09, I occasionally see a 6%, but houses that were, no, it was rare. I felt like I won the lottery whenever I got a 6%. And we as agents did not get 6%. It was split. And this was the question that Charlton Zimmerman had, was the rules on how they split commission between the buyers and sellers fees. Previous to what's happening is going to happen on August 17th, whether we like it or not. It's going to work like this. The buyer's agent will get paid by the buyer. The selling agent will get paid by the seller. There is no commission splits from the selling agent to the buyer agent as a cooperative fee anymore. That doesn't mean that you can't offer some kind of fee or cooperation amount to the buyer's agent if they bring in a buyer.
To the buyer.
To
To
the
the
buyer.
buyer, not to the buyer's agent. They can offer it to the buyer to help pay the buyer's agent.
Yeah, to help pay the buyer's agent. So it's like not a commission, but a concession. So the fee and the way it's set up is going to be completely different, and it's all going to be a negotiation tool for your contracts. Anybody that's buying or selling a home, this can be part of the contract. I think the most interesting thing, and I learned from Jen's video, if they offer like 3.5% to the buyer's agent as part of the concessions or whatever, if there is money left over because the buyer's agent only offered 2%, the rest of that money goes to the buyer and they can use it for whatever they want to use it for. But it has to be within the real estate transaction themselves. They can't grab a check of $1,000 and stick it in their pocket at the day of closing. That money has to be used within the transaction.
100%. 100%. I will say though,
and they didn't know. See, that's the thing. Look, they did not know it was negotiable.
No.
And that is a failure of the system that we had before. And like, and then like advertising wise, buyers agents would say, and this would happen all the time, free. My services are free. They weren't free. They're not free.
No. And I'm not gonna sit here and say and sidestep and say that I never said that, and I'm not gonna sidestep my responsibility. However, when you are going to real estate school and you're getting your license, and they tell you this is what you should say, so it comes down right from the top. It's a failure, not at the agent level necessarily. Not to say the agents are not guilty and and not responsible for what they say. However, this is what they told us to say. This is this is how we were educated on how to present it. It was never presented to us that we need to really enforce the fact that it was negotiable. So it's shining a light on the whole situation, which needs to happen. But I will tell you, Kristina, I think what's going to happen, part of that messy situation that I think is going to happen is I think a lot of people are going to take a step back and say, A, I can't afford a buyer agent, so I'm not going to do it. Or B, I don't see that there's value because before I didn't have to pay for it. But now now I'm responsible for paying the agent. I'm not paying that agent. Before when the services didn't cost me anything, sure, I'll take your services, but now I have to pay for your services. No, I'm good. I don't think what's the value of a buyer agent? And I think what's going to happen, and I'm only speaking from a place of having, helped 800 plus families through the process. And I can tell you without a doubt, they were not 800 smooth, easy transactions. There's always something. There's always something because emotions are involved. And I think a lot of buyers are going to get in trouble. They're going to get taken advantage of by sellers. They're going to not negotiate for things that they probably should negotiate for just because they don't have the experience to know what to ask for.
Well, it's very similar to like for sale by owner, right? For sale by owner. That's the same thing that happens.
I think there's a place. And I did a video about how to sell your house without an agent, because I do think that there is a market segment for people that can and should, that are able to do it on their own, but it's not the norm. You have to have, maybe you've sold some properties yourself, maybe you're a retired real estate agent and you have some experiential knowledge, but the average person, there is a lot. It's not just go and look at the house, write the offer, have an inspection, get a mortgage, sign the papers at closing, get the keys.
There's a lot of emotion when it comes to real estate, and real estate agents.
Absolutely.
A real estate agent, a good one, knows how to take that out and use like what the facts are without bringing a lot of emotion, because you and I both have seen bad sellers, bad buyers trying to buy, trying to work a transaction, and you cannot let them talk to one another because they're going to kill each other. Like it's awful. And so you have to be the one that has to eliminate that emotion. But I want to hit this really quick. This question, it says, no one needs a real estate agent, just a lawyer. I'm going to tell you this right now, because I spoke to several real estate attorneys across the state and across the country. And they said, we're not doing your contracts. There's going to be some that will, but they said, if you think that a real estate agent is too much money, try to hire us, because we're gonna charge you. We're gonna charge you a lot. Not all attorneys are, but a good portion of the really good real estate attorneys don't have time to babysit real estate transactions. They don't have time to take the emotion out of that real estate transaction. They are not going to open houses for you, and they're not going to show you comps in the area. They're not going to do the duties of a real estate agent. They're going to fill out a form. They're going to charge you X amount of dollars, and they're going to send you on your way. And like Jen and I were saying earlier, you're going to see a rise of agents that do things like an a la carte kind of system. Like you're going to buy this house for sale by owner. You need somebody that is knowledgeable of the contract. You want them to just go ahead and fill out the contract the way that you want it filled out. And then they fill it out for you, and then you pay that broker, not the agent, by the way. You're paying their brokerage a fee. And that could be one service that they offer. Not all real estate agents are going to do this, but I'm saying that's one way that in the future or after August 17th, you're probably going to see a lot more agents doing something like this.
100%. I had a situation just last week. Right. Kristina, I almost called you Jackie. Sorry. Somebody had put Jackie Baker in the chat.
She's in the chat.
Jackie Baker.
She's in the chat.
Is she in the chat? Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
I love Jackie Baker. So I had this situation literally last week. Okay, so I have a couple that's in their 70s. They're selling a house, and they're buying 55 plus new construction. Okay. So they are selling and buying on the same day. They're not going into temporary rental. They're selling closing in the morning on the sale, closing in the afternoon on the purchase. Okay.
Right.
Lots of moving parts. Lots of moving parts. As you can imagine, on a, never mind, getting into retirement years, a young person, it's a lot to have in your brain to coordinate movers and the sales of two properties, all the things. Okay. Literally, we're closing on this Tuesday in 2 days. On Thursday, I get an email from the lender on the new construction. There are 3 items that absolutely have to happen today, or we're not closing on Tuesday. I was able to take that. I said to my client, and I said, she's, oh my gosh, you know what? You go pack. Let me work on it. I went back. I worked with the lender. I called the listing agent. We did some juggling, made a bunch of phone calls. It took me the better part of that day and into the next day, but I was able to intervene from the emotional standpoint, so she could take herself out of that emotion until we were able to. Now, was she completely hands off? No. I mean, I did call her, update her, and all the things, but she did not feel like she wasn't responsible for solving the problem.
Right.
It was complicated. The new construction, the final appraisal, they insisted that the landscaping be finished. It's in a development. You don't finish landscaping until all of that, they want seating and all. I'm like, it's not going to happen. So we had to get creative with the solution, think outside the box, get an addendum created and signed and all the things.
And attorneys are not going to have time for that.
Attorneys are not going to do it.
Have time for that. They're not going to do it.
I called the attorney. Because technically we're not allowed as real estate agents, we're not allowed to act like attorneys. So we are not legally allowed to create addendums. I needed the attorney to drop the addendum. I had to call it.
That's a Massachusetts thing, by the way.
It is.
Okay. But we could do addendums here.
Oh, can you? I know everybody's so litigious in Massachusetts, but the point is that for those that said, why do I need a real estate agent? Do you need a real estate agent to open the front door of the house? No. Do you need a real estate agent to tell you that's the dining room, that's the kitchen? No.
Do you need an agent to find you a house online? No.
No. But when the proverbial hits the fan, and you have no idea how to solve that problem, and you have movers, and you got to pick up utilities, and oh my God, what if we get delayed and I got to call the things, I got to change that and all, and never mind if you throw kids in the mix and a job, all the things. You're going to drop everything? No, that's what our job is here. That's what we get paid for. So I think that in a perfect world, if everything was easy and smooth and there wasn't a human element involved with emotions, then it'd be like buying something on Amazon. But
Right.
it
Like
is
buy
not
it.
that way. It is
Right.
not that way.
Yep.
So I think a lot of people are going to try to do it, and it's going to get I think it's going to get really messy for a while until we kind of weed through.
Well, just like anything. Just like anything. But like this is but the thing is like the process is made complicated for no reason. And there's so many parts to making a house close that becomes absolutely ridiculous. The lending situation is no easier to buy a house.
The
Uh,
lending situation is complicated because
yep.
of the fact of a lot of it has stemmed from the financial crisis of the crash of 0607
Mhm.
created so many more steps that we have to go through to safeguard that didn't happen again. Every time
Yeah.
something happens, they do safeguards, but you can thank the lending institution, you can thank attorneys for the 45,000 pieces of paperwork you sign at the closing for how complicated the process is. That is not the real estate agent's fault.
No. Well, even
No.
the real estate contract, when I first got into real estate, the real estate contract was 3.5 pages. Like, yeah, 3.5 pages.
Yeah.
And now it's like 17.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
So,
It's
they're
kind
always
of
changing
ridiculous.
verbiage, adding verbiage, taking stuff away. And like the thing about commissions that is like blows my mind is that it was never disclosed for a long time anywhere how much that was actually going to the buyer's agent when there was the split. Then all of a sudden,
So
out of the blue, they're like, okay, we can't do that anymore. Then it became you had to put it on all the advertising. So, but the way it works now, everything's behind closed doors. So nobody really knows who's getting what where.
yeah, it's kind of interesting
That
because the
because you
DOJ,
can't put it in the MLS. And so how are appraisers
no,
supposed to know how much commissions
the
were split?
concessions.
Yeah, but
Well,
how do they know though?
they'll be in the purchase and sale. It'll be
Okay.
in the purchase and sale, how much money the seller's given the
Mhm.
buyer. So that's how they'll know. But to your point, the DOJ is the one that said disclose, disclose, disclose.
Yes.
They're the ones that said
And now
everybody
there's no disclose.
but
I
now
mean,
now they're like, no, you don't get, what they haven't said you can't disclose concessions, and that's the big thing. They haven't said you can't
so that it's
disclose
just a splitting
concessions.
of hairs. So instead of
Oh,
saying
it is
commissions, they're saying
absolutely.
concessions.
Yep.
This is so
So when
stupid.
people are
So
thinking,
dumb.
it is very dumb. It is
Very
this whole
dumb.
thing is kind of it's so unnecessary. It's so it needed to be done. The real estate industry needed change, right? It
But
needed to
I
be
will
changed, but not this way. Not this way.
but I will honestly
Ridiculous.
say that when I was buying my first house, I was scared to death because I was like, how am I going to pay for this real estate agent? I mean, this like I had no idea. I was in my early 20s, right? I'm like, how am I going to pay for this real estate agent? And then so we get to the point of like we're filling out the contract and everything. I'm like, how do I pay you? Like, how does this work? How am I supposed to like write you a check? And he's like, oh no, that's in the contract. So he explained to me right then and there that like he explained the whole thing, the buyer's agent, the selling agent, and then that commission is split. And matter of fact, at the closing table, the mortgage lender screwed up in some way, and I was short $1,000, and he just took it right out of his commission right then and there.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
like some agents are just willing to do whatever it takes to get the deal closed, and he was willing to take a hit on his commission. I never forgot that. So whenever that situation came up with me, with people like something came up in the last minute, I'm always trying to negotiate with the listing agent for them to offset these costs. Most of the time they wouldn't do it, but I just take it out of my commission. I'm like, you know what, it'll come back to me in another time. That's how I always looked
Yep.
at that.
Overjoyed has a really good question. What
Yeah,
are your thoughts on just using a transaction broker? So transaction brokers, they are not that popular right now. They are not,
they will be though.
I think they will be to a degree. It depends on the level of service that they're going to provide. I mean, you got to think that transaction broker versus a buyer representation, where the agent representing you as the buyer to negotiate on your behalf. If you have an agent that is good at negotiating, who knows what the heck they're doing, right? And that's I was going to say earlier, Kristina, that I think one of the good things that's going to come out of this is people will actually start interviewing their buyer agent instead of just
Right.
hiring just start working with the person that you met at an open house or whatever.
Mhm.
Like that's bogus, right? You should take the time to make sure that this person is actually a good negotiator. But a buyer, to have buyer representation as a, to negotiate on your behalf, not only in the offer, but negotiate during the purchase and sale. Sometimes these attorneys try to weasel. In Massachusetts, we do a two-part state. So it's offer and purchase and sale. It's offer, home inspection, and purchase and sale. And it's almost like 3 points of negotiation. So you may have an offer, but then you get to a home inspection. And now the buyer says, oh, we found these things wrong. The seller's like, I'm not fixing anything. So now the buyer agent, seller, the listing agent will go in, and now we negotiate. Now we're renegotiating the deal.
Yeah.
We're renegotiating. And a transaction agent is not going to do that. They're not going to do that. So
right.
I think you got to weigh it out. You got to weigh it out.
Yeah. Cause because something happened with like an air conditioner, right? And so we've already negotiated everything. And let's just say the commission was 5% at that time. So the 2.5% went to the selling broker and 2.5% went to the listing broker. The air conditioning's out. My buyer wants this house. The seller wants to sell it, but he has no funds left in his, like there's nothing left. So then the agents would negotiate that to see if we could get it done, because it's like $1,500. So we ended up splitting it in order to get the transaction closed. Those kinds of deals are still going to happen. It's just, it's going to be through concessions instead of commissions.
Yeah, there's going to be some interesting things, but I do think that having an agent, I think what's going to happen is a lot of these agents that are the ones that got in when, like a turkey can fly in a hurricane, Kristina, right? So people that like, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money in real estate and I'm going to get in when it's 2021, when it's easy, you put a sign in the ground, it sells and all the things. Well,
I'm not necessarily sad about it.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding? I'm excited.
Yeah, like this. Somebody said the rightest thing ever. Steve
it is awesome. It is. I am so excited.
You get a bunch of newbies becoming agents just out of greed.
Yeah,
they think it's
absolutely
easy.
Absolutely.
And like Jen and I've been doing this for a hot minute. Not every real estate agent has to work under another real estate agent in order to sell houses. Like when I got my license, I knew I was in no. When they send you through school, all you're sent through school to be a real estate agent is you have to know like all the little details. They tell you nothing about filling out contracts. They just say, this is the contract. This represents the sellers, like that's it. They're not teaching you anything about actually doing the job of being a real estate agent.
Yep.
But a lot of these brokerages will get brand new agents to collect their fees, and they throw them out to the wilderness and say, go sell houses. And they don't know what they're doing. And they're not representing buyers in a correct way. With this new system that we're doing, it's going to force these agents to have very uncomfortable conversations, because people hate talking about money. And whenever somebody says, you're going to owe me this, you have to pay me this, that's how the public feels. And a lot of them are going to be like, ew, no. And so it's going to force agents to be better than what they were previous. And it's going to force a lot of agents who really sucked to get out in the first place. I 100%. Mean, like they 100%. Already, some of them have already, like we've already seen a dip in people like signing up for their fees, like they're not renewing their licenses. And, like, I don't care, like I don't care I'm
glad.
We had the real estate correction last time. I mean, honestly, in this little small town I already knew all the agents in the area, right? And when the real estate started coming back, I'm like, who's this person? Who's this person? Who's this person? And you get off the phone with some of these people and you were like, you ended up doing the whole entire transaction because the person on the other line was either lazy or they didn't know what they were doing. So here you are. I had a listing and this agent lied, told me she was ill, and I ended up doing the whole entire transaction. Found out at the end she said she had cancer, for God's sakes. Found out at the end she had cancer 5 years ago. She just didn't want to work. She just wanted to collect her check. I was so mad. So mad. But you know what? They got this house sold. The whole thing is that I represented my sellers in the correct way. They got their house sold and these people got a really nice house. period
So
ends.
I had a situation a couple months ago. I was working with a client. I was representing them as a listing agent, and the market up here, it's northeast. What do I say? What can I say? I don't have to say anything more. It's moving. Things sell pretty quick. Low inventory. All the stuff. And so we put this house on the market. Great price point. Cottage. Get a couple offers right away, and I get this offer. And I look at the name. I said, this person's never been in the house. So I called the agent and I said, okay, so have you been in the house? Oh no. I said, okay, but the buyer knows the seller, so they've been in the house. I said, but you're representing the buyer. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And don't you want to see the property? No, I don't need to.
Ugh, gross.
So that's the kind of buyer agent that we need to get out of the
They're
system.
still going to be around, but that's why I want everybody to interview these people that you decide to hire thoroughly.
That is exactly my point. That's exactly my point, Kristina.
We need a video. I need to do a video on how to interview agents correctly so you get the right agent working for you. That would be awesome. Wisdom Word says business, housing, and house for living should be separate, should go under different rules. So like you're saying, like a transaction for a LLC buying a house. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. And so like if someone was a private equity firm and they were selling their house or buying a house, that should be different than somebody that's like owner occupant. I'm not opposed to that. I'm honestly not opposed to that. If you're a private equity or a investor buyer, you have to pay commissions to both sides. I don't, but if you're an owner occupant, that'd be different. I'm not opposed to that idea. Not at all. Not at all. Because as you know, I'm not a big fan of private equity. And I think a lot of our home increases in certain areas across the country that went up sky high, especially for affordable housing, comes down to private equity firms. And especially around like Atlanta, they have bought whole sections. You can see I put a map on one of my videos of whole sections that they've purchased. Now they dictate the whole market price in that whole area. If all of those private equity firms, not that they don't collude, like when they just found out that they do collude. If they were to sell at one time, they would tank that real estate market all at once. They could do it technically, So yeah, if that was the way, I don't mind that. I think that's actually a good point. Steve M says, I always pay for an inspection. I almost didn't get one. TG, my agent, TG, my agent suggested I do. I stuck with him because of
that. Jackie Baker and I have an entire podcast based on stories from people not doing home inspections and all the things that go wrong in a real estate transaction.
There is a guy, and I wish I remember his name, but there is a guy on TikTok right now who literally goes through home inspections of brand new construction. I mean, in houses that are like from $350,000 all the way up to $5 million, showing some of the most ridiculous things that should never happen in new construction. One of them, the whole foundation, he's like, that ain't right. He was like, he could literally take his hand and he could crumble the corners of the foundation in his hands. Then he was in the bathroom and he was like, what is coming up? There was light coming up through the baseboard and the tile between it. The actual framing of the house was over the foundation. So there's light coming through.
Well, proper ventilation is a good thing in houses. So, it just has extra ventilation. You had a comment in here on your, maybe Eddie can grab it from Tony. Tony Ray's commented about using a home inspector on new construction. That was a great comment.
Well, some people will think that because it's new construction and the county has to come in and approve these things, like, oh, well, it wouldn't pass county inspection if it wasn't okay. Au
these
contraire, mon
guys
frere.
sometimes are paid off to sign off in the building
No,
offices.
we have no proof of this, but rumor has it that some palms are greased when it comes to in county inspections for new construction.
So you say.
Yeah, like
You say.
MHOA says, I was in an industry that had bad rap because of the way customers were treated. I appreciate those, he says, realtors that really do their job. Nothing will fire up a group of real estate agents by saying the word realtor, realtors incorrectly. You could say 15 ways to Sunday and they all get it up. And do you know who actually cares if you say the word realtor wrong? Only realtors. The public could care less.
I don't care.
If all the things to be mad about real estate, it's not the way that somebody
I
says
was just gonna
realtor.
say that. Like, you know what? There are bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you
It's
very
always
much,
so
Erica
funny.
Blue.
Like I'm like, I can't even listen to you because you said realtor wrong. And I'm like, oh, for God's sakes. You have to be real
That's the
estate.
value that I have
You
to this
have to be.
conversation.
So stupid. Eric the Blue says, enjoy the real estate stories from Kristina and Jen. Oh, I've got a boatload. That same thing that I was telling you about the new construction. I had a house that I was representing the buyers, brand new construction. We walk in and they had stuccoed all the window frames all the way around. So every window was stuccoed inside. And then the builder says, well, that makes a great seal. I said, au contraire, mon frere.
Really?
How are they going to get the window out if something needs to be repaired? Then it's going to need to be fixed. And the buyer was like, is it really that big of a deal? I'm like, yes, because you're going to have to take down all of this stucco in order for this window to be repaired. No, you cannot stucco inside. Like, no, you can't have the window
You know what
stucco.
that is? That's called hurry up. We got to get this done because it's Friday afternoon and I want to go home. That's
Unbelievable. But the buyer didn't know, even though he had that inspector, that came in, he told him that, and he was like, was it really a big deal? I'm like, yeah, it's really a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Use a home inspector even on new construction. I was on a staff with a big builder for 15 years as a quality control detector and an expert witness. Oh yeah. Well, good. Thank you. That is great advice. And I know that a lot of people think that real estate agents, when they give kind of recommendations, that there's some kind of in for them to give a recommendation for a home inspector or a title office or anything. We do not and cannot receive any kind of compensation for any kind of recommendation that we give you as far as title company, insurance companies, anything that we're giving you a name of is because we've worked with them 1,000 times and we know they're not full of garbage, because we know who the ones that are full of garbage. We know who the crappy inspectors are. We know who the really good ones are. And so we give you a list of the people that we know. It isn't just one person. We're giving you a list of all the top quality inspectors, insurance companies in our area that we've worked with that have been in the business for a long time. That's another good way to know of a really good agent, when they have a good list of those people in your area. If they don't say, I got a guy for you, then
I got a guy.
Then you need a question. Everybody's got a guy.
Yeah, I know.
Sue Jackson says, how should someone choose an inspector in another state? How should they choose an inspector in another state?
I would say the two ways. First, ask your real estate agent. Second, Better Business Bureau. So I would pull up the Better Business Bureau and find out who is doing their job in that area. And that's a great indicator.
Another thing too is if you're looking and trying to research an inspector, look on the inspector's investigations website. Ooh. And you can find out if they have any kind of appearances coming up. I have never ever tried to get anybody in trouble ever in my life. And I had a house that was for sale. I had an inspector come through. The deal fell apart. And my seller went ahead and fixed all the items that were on that inspection report. 3 weeks later comes by, we get another contract. They go in, we get another inspection, like they say, because they're canceling due to inspection. I'm like, who was your inspector? It's this same guy's name. And I'm like, can I please get a copy of the inspection report? That agent sends it over, and it was the original inspection report from 3 weeks earlier from the other people that paid for it.
So they double charged and
So
did the same
he
inspection.
gave, what he said was, he told the buyer that was buying it 3 weeks later, he said, look, I already have been to this house. I've already been in it. I already know what's wrong with it. You can buy my inspection from me for $50, and you don't even have to purchase it. So she's like, okay, right? And that you can't do that. That's illegal. Like here in the state of Louisiana, you cannot do that. An inspector, even if that inspector walked in 5 minutes earlier and finished an inspection report, walked out in the driveway, and a new buyer came in with an inspection, that new inspection starts all over from the minute that they walk through the threshold again. You cannot resell a inspection report here in Louisiana.
Well, the buyer owns the buyer owns the report. The inspector doesn't own the report.
Right.
The buyer's the one that's paying for the service. So it's their service to do whatever they want to do with it.
So he called me up, and I'm like, you can't do that. That's totally wrong. That's illegal. No, it isn't. I've done it before, and I'll do it again. And he was so snarky.
So if you rob a bank twice or 3 times, then it's okay, because you've done it once. You can do it again, then it must be okay, right?
Right. So that was the only person in my career that I've ever got in trouble, because he was such a snarky, smart rear end. And every time I had a listing and I saw his name on there, I'm like, oh God, here we go. It's going to be bad. But I mean, I had no choice, because I'm representing my seller, and that was not a fair representation to the seller. It was my duty as a real estate agent to turn that inspector in, because you can't sell somebody an inspection that was done on a house 3 weeks prior, especially when a lot of those items had been repaired. You can't do that.
Nope.
Yep. How can you prove a kickback? Like you would have to prove it. You would have to, I mean, like, you can't just say they get a kickback. But so a long time ago, years ago, we used to have home warranties. Like, we still have them, right? But the home warranty company would give us a commission for each one that was sold. It was like a couple $100, and they nipped that in the bud. They're like, no, that's a kickback. You're getting paid to recommend that specific company. And I'm like, I'm still going to recommend that company whether I'm getting paid or not, because they're a good company. So that didn't change anything. Home warranties still were a thing. Some home warranties are better than others, and some real estate agents have a very bad taste in their mouth. But it really does depend on your specific area for that specific home warranty company, because I have one that I use here that I heard in other states is literally garbage. And I think it has to do with their pool of, tradespeople that are in that, in with that company. So, always, that's another thing. Check with a real estate agent. You can't get any kind of kickbacks for anything. And if you can prove it, you can get them in big trouble, just like that inspector. Inspector was telling you. I mean, I think the biggest kickback that any real estate agent gets now for anything is free donuts. Like, here's our home warranty package. I don't know if you've seen it. We brought you some donuts. I don't think donuts is going to change anybody's mind on, what warranty company they're going to choose.
No,
you might get a free pen too.
Everybody in Massachusetts, up in the Northeast, we're cynical, like all very like suspicious and all that thing. So,
absolutely,
that's not a thing up here.
No, absolutely not. No, not a thing. No.
Nope.
Tony Ray says, if your home inspector is intentionally missing items in cahoots with the agent, you need an attorney. Make sure make 100% sure your home inspector carries E&O insurance, errors and omissions, period, full stop. Did you know that real estate agents also have to carry errors and omissions insurance? If they have to carry it as well. And if any real estate agent that works for a brokerage, you can't you can't work for them unless you have that insurance.
So it as a fail safe, right? So somebody's buying a house, and this would be on like, what to do when you're working with a buyer agent. Mm-hmm. If you're buying a house and you're at a home inspection, mm-hmm. the expectation would be is A, the buyer should be following the inspector around everywhere. And B, the buyer's agent should be trailing behind you as well, making mm-hmm. notes so they can see for themselves. I mean, that's how I know what I know with home inspection. I have home inspections now, and the inspector says, "What do you think, Jen?" Because I've been on so many. Because I follow them around. If the buyer's agent is gonna sit in the kitchen and wait for you to do your inspection, don't hire them. They should be, because they need to advise you on, geez, is this a big thing? Geez, can we negotiate this with the seller? Geez, is this something that is significant on, you can have the discussion. When you go to home inspection, it's overwhelming because there's always stuff. There's always stuff. And you sit down with the agent and you figure out, okay, what does this really mean? Can I afford? Because that's the other thing, Kristina. How many times have you been with a buyer and they're like in love with the house? They're in love with the house. And you're like, yeah, but it needs a new roof. I'll figure it out. I'll get extra shit or whatever. And it's like, no, you can't afford this. Like, you really, and so take the emotion out of it. You know what I mean? But the agent should be moving the inspector around as well.
We saw a lot of that during COVID. People were like, I just want the house. I just want the house. And I'm like, oh.
If we never have to go through that market again, I'll be happy.
Oh, I didn't like it at all. Lauren Tam says, thanks for the advice a few weeks ago regarding buying our vacant hoarder house. We're under contract and set to close in a few weeks. Whoop, whoop. Eddie and I bought a hoarder house once. We had a home inspection on that. And you know what? Like every agent does home inspections a little bit different. Like I have home inspectors that I work with. I let them do their job and don't bother them because I end up talking too much. Shocking, I know. And I let them do their whole entire job. And then after they're completely done, they have their camera roll full of pictures. And we talk through every single photograph with the client there. And we're going through each and every one. Those inspections, if you're only there for an inspection for 30 minutes, something's wrong. This takes a long time to go through the whole components because they're basically like, it's the body of the house and they're checking everything. And so they're going through every single component of that house and they're taking photographs to show you all the things that are wrong. Once you've gone through those photographs, you're going to see those same exact photographs on the inspection request repair report. And then you're going to request some of those items to be repaired. But that's like, everybody has their way and methods that they work with their inspectors, but go through it. And that way you understand that is another negotiating tool that you as a buyer need to be aware of. And you need to understand what things you really should be asking for from the sellers to repair. Because some things are stupid. I'm not even going to lie. Some people ask for really dumb stuff. And I had one person that said, I'm like, okay, let's talk about these things that you want to have repaired. And he said, I want everything on that list to be repaired. And there were things like, a chipped, this was a 15-year-old house. And it was like chip paint on the mailbox. I'm like, you want them to fix the chip paint on the mailbox? He's like, I want everything on that list repaired. Everything.
Then you have to ask, like, what's really going on here?
Well, the thing is that, after you explain it to them, if they still want that as a real estate agent, I'm like, okay, I'll ask and we'll see what happens, and then of course, then you get the phone call from the other listing side and says, what's going on? Why are they asking for chip paint to be repainted? I said, he wants everything.
Is that something that if you don't get it fixed, you're not going to buy the house?
I know.
I highly doubt it.
We ended up we negotiated it, like he said he wasn't going to buy it unless they fixed it. He was lucky in the fact that the market was like, these people really needed to sell. And so he was just pushing all their buttons. He didn't get everything, but he got pretty damn close. Even they even replaced, I'm telling you, 15-year-old house. There was a crack in one of the tiles in the kitchen. And he wanted them to remove that tile and replace it with a brand new tile. That pattern hadn't been around forever. So they're like, we can't do that. There is no, he's like, we'll make it work. Find a way to make it work. And they did.
Wow. If you want something bad enough, you figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. There's some questions that are coming in. Eddie's going to go ahead and put them on the screen. I saw a couple come through. You guys are, I don't know how this went from real estate commissions to
home inspections,
but I love it. This is fantastic. I think the message is getting out that commissions are negotiable, that this all hope is not lost as a buyer. You can still negotiate with sellers to have those commissions or under concessions, under the new word concessions. And, it will work itself out. So Vivian says, question, will the appraisal value be different on a house if you are refinancing compared to selling a house? Yes. So I had this happen many times. I don't know if this happens in Massachusetts, but here in Louisiana, if you get an appraisal done on your house and they ask you what's the reason for the appraisal, and I say, well, I want to refinance my house, that appraisal is different than the appraisal that they do when someone's purchasing a house.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, but it is.
But it is.
They tend to give a little bit more cushion, a little bit extra, what they call Louisiana lagniappe, a little extra on a appraisal for a refi than they do on a so that's another. So why is that a thing? That shouldn't be a thing. But it is a thing. And that should be something that needs to investigated. It needs to be reworked.
Well, I think you know what the reason is? I'll tell you what the reason is because appraisals, even though people will think, well, gosh, an appraiser is like the end all be all, that the real estate agent is just making up the number and the appraisal is concrete and scientific. The process I go through is an appraisal. I'm not a licensed appraiser, but I go through the exact same process. The appraisal process is still super, super subjective. It's subjective.
Right. It's one man's opinion.
How much
educated guess.
So you ask an appraiser, how much is this bedroom worth? Or how much is this extra square footage worth that is finished on a sunroom? It's not a formula, right? It's not a formula, which means you have a purchase price and here's the number. They obviously want to see if they can make it work so that two parties don't, end up losing out. So they're going to try to push the numbers to get that thing to work. But if you're refinancing and you do have the little bit more, more cushion or whatever, more latitude, then they use that. I actually find that the refinance numbers come in lower than the sale numbers. That's why
they're opposite here. They're opposite here. They're way opposite.
It's just because it's the human condition, though. That's the thing. Appraisals are subject. And
right, because somebody says like average wear and tear. What your opinion of average wear and tear on something is going to be completely different from the next person coming along. So that valuation for average wear and tear is going to be completely different. Like what they say that cost is different. Absolutely.
Yep. 110%.
Yeah.
110%.
And the thing is that if anything comes up during your inspection period, that is another negotiation process that you can negotiate with the seller on. If you are a buyer and all these things come up and you still want to purchase the house here in Louisiana, if during your inspection period, you don't have to buy the house if you have an inspection and you don't like everything that happened. It's not a pass or fail. It's just up to the buyer to go through that inspection and say, hey, I don't want it after I've had this inspected, as long as you're in your due diligence phase, But if you do want to have those things done and the seller says, yeah, we'll fix them. Again, this is a negotiation process and you have to work with someone experienced because you have to word the repair request correctly because you can get yourself in trouble. Just because you said, I want these windows replaced, you want them replaced by the right kind of people and you want them to be able to prove receipts and you like all of these things.
Licensed contractors.
Yeah, exactly. Insured licensed contractors. All these verbiage and words and little things mean something at the end of the sale. And that's why.
So you bring up so you bring up a great point. And oftentimes you think, okay, when we say negotiation, immediately, what do we think? Money. That's what people mostly think of is when you say negotiation, it's money, right? You're negotiating money, a credit or whatever. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a combination of the two. Sometimes you got to get really creative, whether it be at the offer or the home inspection. And I think that's where when you have somebody helping you, have an agent that has had experience with different transactions that can suggest different ways. You come up with a list of things from the home inspection and the seller says, I'm not giving you any money. Well, then the thing is the buyer's agent, I'm going to talk to the listing agent and find out what the hot buttons are for the seller. Like what's really important to the seller. Oh, well, the seller said that he doesn't want to give out any money because of whatever reason. He's got an aversion to do that, but he's handy. So now we go back and we maybe craft it a little bit different. We have a discussion on what's the most important. It's that type of back and forth. That's all negotiation. It's not just a hard, hey, we want this money. Hey, we're going to do this. And then it's a money thing. It could be a combination of all these different things and having the correct verbiage. Having the correct verbiage on those negotiations when you're talking about repairs and stuff is crucial. Because stuff like that happens. Be like, oh, well, you said have it fixed. And then you walk in, you're like, what the heck is this? Well, I fixed it. And you're like, okay, so that's not the way I wanted it to be fixed. That wasn't in the document, so it's so important to like get because of just the fact that the transaction is ridiculously complicated. And that's the reason why it's complicated.
It didn't used to be so complicated. Enough lawyers got involved and then it became a lot more complicated.
Exactly.
Debbie says, Debbie, not Doobie, Debbie Brady, Future Shaper said, I had a poll. I said, do you think real estate agents get paid too much? And there was 397 people that actually voted. And 50% of them said yes. 50% said real estate agents get paid too much. 21% said no. But 29% said they weren't sure. I would love to interview the people that are unsure. Like, I think some of I will say some real estate agents are worth their weight in gold.
Okay. You know what?
And some are not worth a fart in the wind.
So let me ask you a question. Why do some people buy iPhones and some people buy Androids? Why do some people buy iPhones and spend ridiculous amounts of money for a phone that will do the same thing as the cheapy Android phone? It's because Apple, not for everybody, but for the majority of people that buy iPhones, they've demonstrated value.
Right.
There's value in the Apple product. They'll pay money, extra money for that Apple product because the value we know there's all the different features, everything else. I think the answer to the question is not, do real estate agents get overpaid? I think the answer to the question is the value enough for the real estate agent to get paid at the amount that they're charging? And the answer is no. So if you have an agent that's providing more value, the people can actually see what they're doing. They understand what they're doing. I think people will be more willing to say, okay, now I understand. And oh, you're not, I'm okay with paying that. But the problem is the industry has done a crummy job at demonstrating what the heck agents do. And a lot of agents just don't do anything. A lot of agents put their iPhone case on an Android phone and think that they're awesome, So
right.
That's right.
Eric the Blue says, Kristina's big mug, Jen's big mug is causing me to suffer from mug insufficiency syndrome. Is yours as big as mine?
I don't know. I got a big head. I have a very big head, so I don't know. It's pretty ginormous.
I like big mugs and I cannot lie.
My life's a big mug. I love this mug.
I ran out of milk for my tea, so I had to drink water.
Oh, there you go.
Not sponsored by this company, by the way. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not getting affiliated with them. I just like their water. Lawnmower always says this. He's a commonologist on my channel. He says the mug is a normal size. Kristina's just super tiny.
Well,
I'm not exactly tall.
I met Kristina, when I met you for the first time, I'm like, oh, I thought you were taller.
Yeah, everybody always says it. They're like, oh, you're just a little person. I'm like, well, I'm 5 foot. I've made it. 11 Lights says, question, is there any specific time you should refinance? And what homework should you do or leg work before doing it? If you don't, nobody's saying you have to refinance at any time in your life ever. You can keep that 30-year fixed rate mortgage till the day you die. If someone during the pandemic got a 2.5% interest rate for all the love is holy, like do not refinance that 2.5% because we'll probably never see 2.5%. But there are times in your life that things happen, whether your kids are going to college, somebody is getting married, something like that, that you may want to take out some of the equity that's been built up in your home, that you may want to refinance again. You're going to have to make that financial decision for yourself. You're going to have to break it down with a lender, work with a financial advisor, find out if there's other ways that you could do it without having to give up on that interest rate. But if you have a really high interest rate, and let's say you have an 8% interest rate, and interest rates come down to 5%, hell yeah, you're going to refinance.
Yeah, 1%. I would say that would be 1%. If you have a rate,
unless you're at the end of your loan, unless you're in the last 5 years of your loan, don't do it then.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Because at the beginning of your loan, that's when you're paying all the interest, right? And it's a sliding scale.
It's about a 7-year recapture most of the time for, the closing costs that you incur when you refinance. So there's going to be that break even period. But usually the rule of thumb has always been, when I've talked to financial advisors and mortgage reps, it's usually in order for it to make sense, it's got to be at least a 1 full percentage point. Anything less than that, there's not a whole lot of, there's probably some value, but very, very little.
I always heard 1.5.
1.5, huh?
Yeah. That's what I said.
All right. I did the 1% right before the rates went up, and I'm glad I did. I am glad I did.
Steve M has a question. Have you done a show about buying a home with VA loan? If so, can you post a link, please? I have not, but there is a channel on the old YouTubes called Win the House You Love, and there's another channel called Jeb Smith, my friend Jeb Smith. They both have videos on VA loans that are literally break it down very simply. I'm not a lender. I'm not a loan officer. I don't work in mortgages. And that's one of those things that I know my lane. So I will not discuss them, because this is not, I talk about real estate. I talk about affordable housing. You don't see me talking about condos, because I don't know that. I stick with what I know. And those two channels are the experts when it comes to that. Go to their channels. They have really good information. When you find one of those videos, make sure you put in the comment section, Kristina Smallhorn sent me. They'll probably be like, huh? They're friends of mine. Honestly, I have that guy, Kyle Seagraves, on my channel during the live streams quite often. He's a really good lender. He's a super smart guy. Super smart guy. So Quidizzle? Is that how I say it? Quidizzle. The truth is, top agents are always agents the best at convincing the seller to sell below the market. The truth is, agents who provide more value for sellers are less successful. I don't think agents, let me just put it this way. Well, how would that help the seller to sell their home below market value? That doesn't help the real estate agent. No, that doesn't help the seller. The representation, of a real estate agent for a seller is in the seller's best interest. They don't want them to sell it below market value at all.
So if I play devil's advocate for a second, and say, the agent only cares about themselves and they want to make as much money as possible. We're in a seller's market. You don't have to lower the price to sell a house. And an agent that cares only about the money wants to sell it because it's based on percentage. They want to sell it for as high as possible to make the most amount of money. So that wouldn't make sense. An agent who really is only in it for themselves is really going to want to push to list it for higher so they can make more money.
Yeah, but if you're splitting $10,000, let's just say it's $10,000 more, give or take. How much more is that in commissions? Not much. Like $100 after you pay brokerage fees. Depends
on where you live. If you're in California, it's a lot of money.
Well, no, I'm saying the difference between $10,000 in the price of the house. Let's just say instead of 110, it's 120. You're fighting over $100. That's like stupid.
I think the more important thing is that if an agent wants to sell it for less than what you think it should be selling for, the agent should be providing data. The data doesn't lie. I am a broken record when I'm talking with sellers. The data is the data. I have no opinion in the matter. The only opinion I offer is what to do with that data once we get it, because the interpretation of the data is going to be A, my experiential knowledge on what I know about the area, and B, how does the market impact that data? That's all. But the data doesn't lie. If the data says that the house should be listed this, it's not the seller, the listing agent trying to steer you on anything. But if the agent, the thing that kills me is the agents will go into the house and they'll come up with a price off the top of their head, and then they present to the seller and there's no evidence to back that up. None. That's a problem. Kick those agents to the curb. The agent should have they should be able to, you should challenge that agent. I did a video about this, about the things that you should ask your agent, and things you shouldn't tell your agent, actually. And,
but here's the thing too, though. I'm going to cut you off real quick because
sorry. I was getting on I'm sorry. It's
okay.
I get all passionate about this stuff.
Well, if you're working with an agent and you think that they're selling your house for less than you feel like it's worth, like, this is the interview process, right? So if you're selling
100%.
your home and you shouldn't just be asking one real estate agent, you should be interviewing several real estate agents,
right,
and all of them should be giving you data, like Jen said, giving you the data that shows how much the value of the house is, right? And the comps are the comps, and it's all computer generated on our end, right? So we're just putting in the comps, and the computers shoot out the numbers of what the value is of that house. You have to look at those comps that those agents are using and see if that's truly comparable to your house. That way, you know what is the right price to sell your house at. And you have a knowledge of the agents in your area that were going to be working best for you. When my parents were moving out of their house, I found them 5 agents that they could interview. And I mean, there was one that was like literally shooting for the stars. They told them they could put their house up for sale for $850,000. And my dad was like, "Are you out of your mind?" He's like, "I would have loved to have gotten $850,000 for my house, but there's absolutely no way that my house is worth that." So, so dumb. Hey, Eddie, I already answered that question from Steve already. So Mark has a question. It says, how will real estate agents make ends meet? Are they being replaced by algorithms? Ooh, this is a great question. The strong will always survive. Good real estate agents know how to adjust to any real estate market. I happen to start in the worst real estate market in history. I mean, other than like the 20s, right? But everybody knows what happened during 07, 08, 09. There was nothing was moving, nothing was selling, and I still was able to start my career and make a business out of it. Those agents that made it through there are really good agents, and the strong will survive. The people that can't adjust will get out and do something else.
I absolutely agree. And because the reality of it is that, even in the worst times, people still need to transact, whether it's foreclosure or death or divorce, or the house is too big, the house is too small, whatever the reason is. There's still people that need help with going through that process, and adapting to that process, whatever that those needs are. That's going to be the name of the game. I mean, the name of the game in the next few months is going to be the agents that understand that they need to change in terms of the consumer response to what's going to happen with this whole commission thing. That's going to be the big change. And the agents that adapt that to what the consumer needs and what the consumer deserves, they're the ones that are going to be fine. I'm not worried. I'm not worried at all.
Question for you.
I'm not full of money. I mean, I'm a single mom. I don't have loads of dough, but I know that the formula is, if I do the right thing, I work hard, I sharpen the education saw and learn, then I'll be able to help people and it'll take care of itself.
I have a question for you. So several years ago, this new thing called CarMax came on the market, right? So CarMax would buy all these different cars. Do you see something like HouseMax, like a corporate investor buys a whole series of houses and resells them at a flat rate?
I don't think so. because
Okay.
the fact of the matter is that, I mean, in terms of, are you asking from the perspective of the real estate agent being replaced? Is
I'm
that what you're
saying
asking
that
from?
like
Or
the model is, instead of a real estate agents, you go in there and you like this is called House Max, just like CarMax. House Max has all of these houses for sale. They're not using the MLS. They are not,
Yep.
this is only their houses. It's a flat rate that's like the house is 150,000, no matter what. It's 150,000 and you buy it. Do you
So
see
where do
that?
the houses come from though?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Because
So
that's,
you know, like think about it though. Private equity owns a lot of affordable housing. What if they decided they wanted to basically, because they, a lot of the areas that they own big chunks and they want to dictate the
Mhm.
market. Could
We
technically
don't
they,
have that up here that much. We don't have an issue with that up here anyway. I don't
well,
see that at all.
right. But I like there's a lot here in the South, a lot of
Yeah.
private equity. A lot, a lot. And then they own big chunks of affordable housing in an area. I could see that possibly being a thing, that like
Possibly.
they're like, this is House Max. These are all of our houses online. It's not, like you have their House Max person that comes in and says, okay, you want to see this house, that you walk out there and they're just paid like they're not getting paid commissions. They're just getting paid like an hourly rate, because all they're technically doing is opening house. They would not have to use real estate state contracts because they're selling it within their own company, like their own builder contracts, right?
Yep.
So that contract would only represent them as a seller, not necessarily you as a buyer. It would still qualify technically for mortgages.
Maybe.
I'm not saying this is a
Yeah.
thing. I'm saying that I could see that in the future. I could see
Yeah,
something like that
potentially.
happening.
I mean, I think, who knows? I think that that's not going to replace though the average uh transaction. And I think the question that he was getting at maybe was that, about like maybe algorithms replacing the real estate agent not be able to make ends meet because because people would be using online needs instead of a real estate agent. And I
Mhm.
just don't see that ever happening because of the fact that most home purchases, home sales
Mhm.
are emotional processes.
Mhm.
A home seller gets emotional. A buyer gets emotional. You're buying a house. It's not a checklist. Oh, it's got 3 bedrooms, 4 baths, blah, 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 and okay, great. This is the offer, whatever. No, you're buying it because you love it.
Mhm.
Buy it because you feel like I see myself living here. Now, when you're negotiating, you have to separate that emotion from the logic. And that's where a good agent comes in and handles the logical side, because the buyer you can't do both. You can't think with your head and your heart at the same time. And the seller who's like, I need to move, but I'm really sad. And I painted this house myself, so that's worth money. And I've done this to and they have all this sweat equity into it. And they can't separate the two. It's hard to separate the two.
I think
And
there's
a
just
listing
a
agent is,
I just think
that's
there
what they're
is
looking
a
for, I
person
think, the
for
value.
everything. Like there's some kind of
Yes.
agent for everything, and not all people are going to need the same kind of hand holding as
Nope.
others. So
I
the
agree.
ability for people to have that option, and it's going to be more available to them, I think it's a good thing.
I
Fantastic Family
I
says,
I agree.
Fantastic Family says, I can say, Christina, is that you helped me understand what happened to me when I bought this home and how my realtor failed me. I'm so sorry. I'm
So
so
sorry.
sorry. And also refinancing, and also about refinancing. Thank you so much. Well, I'm glad that helped you. I'm sorry you had a real estate agent that didn't really work out the best for you. That's awful.
Mm.
But anyways, Jen, I want to say thank you so much for talking to us today about the real estate commissions, inspections, all this stuff. This was a great conversation. I would love to have you on
I
again.
enjoyed it. I'd love to. Of course, anytime. 100%.
Yeah. And you know what, everybody, I want everybody to know this. Go over to Jen's channel and watch her last video when it comes to real estate commissions. She covered it from wall to wall. Although we had this conversation today, that was a very full, comprehensive, well put together, super educational video. And that's why I had Jen on today, because it was like, I watched that. I was like, that was a great video. Good job, Jen. Good job,
Thank
Jen.
you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
So,
Appreciate it.
yeah. So anyways, if anybody wants to get a hold of Jen, go over there. Jen Sylvester, there she is. She's the savvy home seller. Look at her.
Savvy home seller. Yes, ma'am.
If you go and listen to this as a podcast, Jen, or you want to share it with somebody, all you have to do is go to anywhere you listen to podcasts and go to Kristina Smallhorn, Real Estate for Everyone, and you can share this episode with your friends and family. If you guys wanted to listen to it as well, I encourage you to do that and give me a little thumbs up, a little stars, a little 5 stars. I would really appreciate that. All right, everybody, you have a fantastic week. If you need to get a hold of me, you can go to my website, KristinaSmallhorn.com, click on one of the pink buttons, fill out the form, make sure you put your phone number there, and I'll give you a call and we'll talk about your real estate needs. All right, everybody, you have a fantastic week. And if you have any questions in the meantime, you also can put it in the comments section below after this video is published. Jen, you look snazzy, I have to tell you.
What's that?
You look snazzy. You're snazzy.
No.
And if anybody wants a big cup like this, in the description bottle below, there's a a link to my cup. Eddie wants everybody to know that Colombia is playing Argentina. I don't know if anybody knows this, but Eddie is Colombian, and he is very hyped for soccer. Go sport. I could care less. If it makes Eddie happy, everybody's happy. So bye, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday with us. I appreciate you.